Hey everybody, how does your garden grow? I'm Eric Johnson, and this is Pushing Bits. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pushing Bits. I'm Eric Johnson, I'll be your host. This being our first episode, I just want to take a quick minute and tell you what we're doing and why we're doing it. I've been doing podcasting for several years, a lot of IT topics. I've talked about mobile devices, IT professional information that if you're an IT professional you need to help do your job. I conduct a lot of interviews with authors and people in IT, and I wanted to take my love of podcasting and some of the background I have in that and put it towards a hobby of mine, board gaming. I've been board gaming for about 3 or 4 years now. Always growing up played things like Risk and Monopoly like everybody, but getting into the more expansive board gaming scene now. My collection's sitting around 300 games, which I know isn't a lot for some of you. If you ask my wife, it's about 300 more games than anybody needs, but that's just one person's opinion. And what I'm going to do with the show is just provide you information about board games. I'm going to do 2 shows a week on a regular basis. So on Mondays, I'm going to do a game review. I'll pick some game, whether it be a new game, a tried and true classic game, and I'm just going to review it. Tell you what I think of it, give you a little bit about the gameplay, let you know if it's a game that, in my opinion, is worth having in your collection. Thursdays, I'm going to do news. What's coming out? What expansions are being released? What games are going to iOS or Android or being digitized so you can play them online? Okay, and just keep you up to date on everything that's new and exciting in the world of board gaming. I'm also going to throw in some special episodes. I'll have full game rule explanations, and I'll have fun little segments that I'll also toss in from here and then, just to mix things up, keep it entertaining. All right. Today's episode, being our very first, is going to be a game review. Today we're going to review Garden Dice. Now, Garden Dice is a game by Meriday Games, publisher and designer Doug Bass. Okay, he kickstarted this game last year. And it's since come out and it's available for purchase. Fun little quick game, a little strategy game. Plays in about an hour, okay? 2 to 4 players, great family game, good little strategy in this thing. So we're gonna take a quick look at it. I'm gonna give you an idea of how the game plays, what you have to do to get through it, and then I'll give you my rating on it, and we'll wrap up. Another thing that I'm gonna do, so you can expect this on a regular basis whenever I do a game review, is before I actually do the review, I'm going to cut and give you a full play of the game. I'm going to have recorded a full play of Garden Dice. And we're going to play that back in 30 seconds. So before we get into the review, enjoy this super fast play of Garden Dice. So let's take a look at the actual game of Garden Dice. Your game board is a grid that represents the garden, okay? It's outlined with die numbers along 2 fences. So you have 1 through 6 along this fence, 1 through 6 along this fence. Those correspond to various coordinates around the garden, and that's where you're going to be able to place your tiles. These tiles over here constitute the supply in the game. These are the seeds that you'll plant. So these should all be seed side up. Some of these are flipped. So these are the seeds that you'll get. Each seed, there's different types of each one, but ultimately you have seeds that are of values 1 through 5. The higher seed values are more valuable at the end of the game. Your objective is to get these seeds, acquire them, get them on the board, and then water them. When you water them, they become a vegetable. You then harvest them, they come off the board, and they score Veeps for your player. Okay? So I have bits out here for the red team and the blue team, and I'll just kind of show you how this works. The game also comes with some handy reference cards. There's one of these for each player, giving you the possible actions on this side, okay? A description of all the special tiles and endgame scoring. Handy little scorecard here. Basically, this game is done with dice, but there's some strategy to it. So to acquire these seeds, to be able to put them on the board, you have to use single die. So a single die, say a 3, can get you a 3 or lower valued seed. A 5 could get you any seed you want, but it's 1 die for 1 seed. So a 1 can only get you a 1. So you use them by spending the die. So I've rolled these die at the beginning of my turn, and now I'm going to spend the die. So I'm going to spend this 3 to buy a 3 seed. I'm going to place it in front of myself and mark it with my color disc. The number of discs you have are finite, so the number of things you can have marked in the game are also finite. In order to get a seed on the board, you spend 2 die and place the seed at the coordinate that you spent. So if I spend a 5 and a 4, I can go right here. So I'd take my seed and I'd plant it at space 5, 4. These 2 die would be spent. Once dice are on the board, you can water them by spending, again, a die that's the same value or less. So to water a 3, I'd have to spend at least a 3. I could also spend a 4 or 5 on that, as long as it's bigger, and I would water that particular tile. So I'd spend my 5, I'd water the tile, and now it's a vegetable. And then on a later turn, to get it off, I'd again spend 1 die, like in this case a 3 or less. Same thing applies for this. And I'd take this off the board, I'd get my little disc back, and I'd score the Veeps on the tile. I'd score 3 Veeps when I harvest. On the surface, that's the basics of the game. You acquire seeds, you place them on the board, you then water them, and then harvest them off the board for points. Okay, that's the basics of the game. Where the strategy comes in is in the placement and the usage of your die. Okay, and I'll talk about these little special tiles here in just a second. What ends up happening is, let's say you have a higher valued seed next to a lower valued seed. So here's a 4 next to a 3, both owned by blue. And just as an example, I'll put a 2 out, owned by red. If I were to use my 1 die to water this 4, so I would spend, say, a 5 die to water this 4 seed, water trickles down. So what ends up happening is any seed next to it that's a lower value would also get watered. So if I had another 4 here, owned by red, and I chose to water this 4 that's owned by blue on my turn as the blue player, I would actually water this 4, I would water this 3 next to it, and I would water this 2, even though it's an opponent's 2. I would not water this 4 because it's the same value as the one I watered. It has to be lower. Same applies when you go to harvest. If I harvest this 4, I would harvest these 2 off for me for 7 points, but I would also harvest this one off for red. Red would get 2. Because I harvested an opponent's tile, I get a bonus point. So I'd actually score 4 plus 3 plus 1, or 8 points. Okay, so I'd go from my 3 that I had to 11. Red would get this back and his disc, and red would score 2 points for me doing that. Okay, so that's some of the strategy in the game, is getting your discs on the board and then harvesting them at the right times. And sometimes you are going to have to give your opponents points. You also see these 2x spaces in the corner. That's if you use the high dice, which are valuable for other things. High dice are valuable for getting big seeds. High dice are valuable for getting special tiles flipped over, which we'll talk about in a second, or removing a critter, which is one of the special tiles. But if you want to burn a 6 and a 5, you can get a seed planted over here at 6 and 5. Then when I water, when I go to harvest, instead of being worth 3, it's worth double, or 6 points. So there's a trade-off there. Why is there a trade-off? These special tiles. So using the same strategy of 2 dice, you can place these special tiles on. First special tiles are a rabbit on one side and a bird on the other. Birds can eat seed, your opponent's or your own. Rabbits can eat vegetables. So if I were to put it on the board at 3 and 3, when I initially put it on, I can choose which side I'm putting it on. So let's say I put my rabbit on here at 3 and 3. I'd mark it blue. In order to flip that rabbit to get it back over to the bird, if I decide later I need my bird, I would have to spend a 6 to flip that over, which is one of the reasons why 6s are so valuable, because they can do things like flip your special tiles. Now, what do these tiles do? Whether it's a bird or a rabbit, you can move the critter by using die. So you move your critter in a straight line up to the value of the die you used. So if I rolled this, That's a 4 and a 6. I could burn this 6 to move up to 6 spaces. So if I'm here, I could actually get all the way across the board because the furthest you can move is 5. But let's say I'm there and I want to use my 4. I can go 1, 2, 3, and I could stop at 3. Then I'm going to go ahead and use my 6, which is a huge waste of a 6, to move 1 space over, and I would eat this seed. My choices are spit the seed out, which basically gives it back to the player whose bird ate it, and return the red marker to the red player. Or I can throw this seed out of the game completely and put another blue marker on my bird to represent that he got fatter for eating the seed. Same applies if that's on the rabbit side, only the rabbit moves to eat a vegetable. Okay? That's the rabbit and the bird. The other special tile that you guys have when you start this game is the sundial, which is here. It's a sundial on one side or a scarecrow on the other. Scarecrows protect all adjacent seeds. So if this was a seed and I had a bunch of scattered seed around my scarecrow like this, anything in the 9 squares around the scarecrow are protected. They can't be eaten by birds as long as they're seeds. Okay, so this is a protected seed, can't be eaten by a bird. And these would all be mine, marked with a blue token. But the second I were to flip this over and to water it, turn it into a vegetable, now the rabbit can still eat it. The other advantage of the scarecrow is when I harvest a vegetable, I get bonus points. So the scarecrow actually gives me bonus Veeps because it's adjacent to my scarecrow. So I'd actually get 3 bonus Veeps. Now, you can't get the bonus Veeps and the 2x. So in this case, I'd harvest this 3, I'd get 3 bonus Veeps, but I would not get the times 2. The scarecrow cancels it out. That's what the scarecrow does. If you have this flipped over with a 6, use a 6 die, flip it over, now it's a sundial. All the sundial does is it gives now the blue player, as long as it has a sundial out, the ability to add or subtract pips to dice when placing or removing tiles. So if I were to have a 6 and a 4, I get 2 pips worth of replacement. So I could turn this 6 to a 5 or this 6 to a 4, or I could use a pip on either die and turn my 4 into a 3 or a 5, and my 6 down to, it doesn't wrap around, but my 6 go down to a 5. So I could actually make this a 5 and a 5 by flipping that 6 over to a 5, flipping this 4 over to a 5. There we go. And now I can place something at the 5, 5 position on the board. That's what the sundial does. Everyone also starts with a sun token. If you hold on this to the end of the game, it's worth 5 Veeps. Otherwise, you can use it to re-roll die during the game. And then the last thing you can do is you could remove a critter. So if I happen to have the coordinates for a critter, whether it's mine or my opponent's, so let's say I have this 4 and the 2, I could remove this rabbit at 4 and 2. But in order to do it, I also have to burn a 6. So I have to burn the coordinates where the rabbit is, plus a 6 to be able to pull him off the board. Now why would I do that? 1, to get one of my opponent's critters away because he's been meddling. Or 2, if I chose to eat a lot of my seed or my vegetables, my rabbit's going to be getting kind of fat. And again, these are limited resources, these tiles. So you want to remove your critter. He comes off the board. You get your discs back for purchasing seeds or for marking seeds on the board. Okay? End of the game is all about set collection. I'm not going to go through the entire end game scoring, but at the end of the game, you get points, for example, if you have 1 of each vegetable or a set of 3. So that's how you get points at the end of the game through set collection. So fun little strategy game about placing discs at the right spot on boards, looking for that chainage, and a decent amount of ronkage of the other player once you start getting the rabbit and the bird on the board. You start having your scarecrow that's protecting some of your seeds. You end up in these conundrums whether you should water your seed or not because it'll also water your opponent's seed. So very fun little game. Plays in about an hour. Easy enough that the family can understand it, but meaty enough that you're playing with a couple adults who like a strategy game. They're going to have a fun time playing a little bit of Garden Dice. So that's it for Garden Dice. Really quick little fun strategy game. Lots of obviously luck involved because you are rolling the dice, but you still have to plan a strategy that lets you take the dice you have and do the right things with it in order to be successful and win the game. I rate every game on this show, so let's take a look and see what rating we're going to give Garden Dice. And at the end of the day, we're going to give Garden Dice a 7. Again, solid game. I enjoy playing it. 7's not necessarily bad in my book. If it's a 6 or above, it's a pretty good game. 8s or 9s, 10s are really good games. If you want more information about how I do ratings and what all my different ratings kind of fall and how they are, check out my website, pushingbitspodcast.com, and there'll be an explanation there of what the ratings mean. But a 7 for Garden Dice, pretty solid game. Would play it again, really do enjoy it. So if you get the opportunity, I suggest you pick up a copy of it, at least play it a few times. And if you have a group of gamers that you get together with, one of you should own it, because it's a fun game to pull out once in a while. So until next time, this has been another episode of Pushing Bits.